Isaiah is next. We're getting a call from Hawaii too. I don't think we've had a call from Hawaii on this show. Isaiah, what's going on?
Yes, gentlemen. Thanks for having me and hosting this wonderful show. It's a nice rainy day out here, and I'm not in the trees, so happy about that.
Nice. Cool. Well, how can we help you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I would like to get back to real quick the QAnon thing. That is heavily laden with biblical apocalyptic language. It grabs the Christian nationalists right by the cross. I mean, it definitely further weaponized Christianity into like more nationalist, fascist type movements, and that's been working in conservative circles for a while. But no, QAnon is definitely intentionally tapping into just blind faith on the Christian side of things.
So yes, I agree with that, Isaiah. I think I know you have another point to make, but I also want to add on because a lot of people don't realize this. Not only is it tapping into kind of this, kind of fascist undertones here, but it swings the other way too. I cannot tell you how many Instagram, yogi like influencers have also got into QAnon. People who would have never even considered voting the other way before have also got into QAnon because crazy swings both ways, but also like when it comes to like conspiracy stuff, there's conspiracies that go on both sides of the political spectrum, and Q appeals to both of those sides. Absolutely.
Because they believed in karma.
It dissolved.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It all comes back to karma. Just like anyway, Isaiah, I know you, but that's not what you want to talk about. So what's up?
That's right. So I called to talk about truth in mythology.
Okay.
And how I think humanity has known how the universe works before and has constructed mythos and what we call religions to be transmitted downstream through time in more primitive cultures when we have major catastrophes like the comet impacts, for example. There's a huge mythological aspect of our past. But where do you think like the fallen angels who bring hell to earth, even the global flood myth that has representation through many different cultures, I think can be traced back to a massive comet impact in the Indian Ocean. That's one side of mythology. The other side is I think that mankind has had a high technological age before, and we had high technology kind of different from ours today. And I know that's more in the pseudo-history, pseudo-geography. But what I like to get into is like the stories of God. Now, it's been anthropomorphized through time, the Abrahamic ideas, and God is always projected as this human ego that has all these wants and gets pissed off about all these things. And I kind of steered completely away from that avenue of inquiry. I was interested in how does a God create? How is this creation? And I use that in the biblical term. I think it's an inherent order that was unfolded from a previous unity. It wasn't just willy-nilly godded into existence out of nothing or anything like that.
Okay. You have there's a lot of different things here. Before we go on, there's like 3 different things that we could talk about, honestly, because I'm a little. Let's go back to number 1. Number 1 was a comet hit the Indian Ocean, and you believe that relates to world mythologies, including angels and other things like that.
Yeah, there are actually 2 main events that I'm thinking of. One was 5,000 years ago. It's called the Burple Crater in the Indian Ocean. And we believe it's a comet impact. It hasn't been explored because it's 12,500 feet underwater, but we can image it, and it's an 18-mile wide crater.
But what's in it? Purple Crater.
5,000.
Burple.
Burkle.
Right, I'm trying to see. Burple Crater.
And there's even a cuneiform tablet, I believe, is recording an impactor. And this was dated to 5,500 years ago. So it's right in the same area. And it was described as a white bowl that was thrown to Earth.
Okay. So this is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, this comet.
Yes.
It looks like. I'm seeing a picture of it now. and they're saying relatively recent. I'm just reading Wikipedia, circa 3000 to 2800 BCE. Okay, so there's a comet that hits the Indian Ocean, and somehow we get angel mythology from this. I don't understand the link there. Where does that come in?
Oh, well, comets, as we see coming in, often in gravity wells, they split up. So it's multi-headed. They're big. Okay. They have big shaggy comas around them. And so they also have a debris trail. So if I were an ancient man, and I think everything that's going on in the heavens is, of course, the action of God and the angels and all this stuff, what does a massive comet flying down out, just coming towards the Earth, hits the Earth, and then its tail comes in, and thousands of shooting stars of tiny meteorites and everything is just not maybe hitting the Earth, maybe not, but just covering the sky with fireballs, and it's this hugely unprecedented event. How would that be mythologized in the ancient minds? And very easily, the rebel angel that was cast out of heaven, that's bringing hell to earth, and his time is short, and all these things just line up right away. Similar legends in Egypt. Sekhmet, the Eye of Ra, was cast down in the form of a lion to destroy wayward man in a flood of blood. And so take a look at where Burkle Crater is. And when it hit, the geologists looking around the area believe it created a 600-foot wall of water that went outward in all directions. Now, the Gulf of Aden and the Gulf of Oman would focus that amplitude of the tsunami into an even higher wave that travels right up the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, inundating ancient Ur, the Mesopotamian area, Egypt. That would account for the lateral flood damage of the pyramids and the Sphinx, things like that.
Okay, you got a lot to hear. Joey, you want to say something?
Yeah. The thesis of this is that there are naturalistic explanations for these mythologies in the Bible, correct?
Yeah. And other world religions, I guess, but specifically the Bible, I think is what he's talking about.
And then, like, of course, they would choose these conclusions that we don't agree with today because of our scientific advancements.
Yeah, I think that's broadly
a different paradigm.
Yeah, this is kind of. I meant to talk about this more like a couple months ago. I mean, this was almost half a year ago now. I said I wanted to talk about the electric universe stuff because there was this idea about you could see stuff in the aurora lights or what's called the northern lights and stuff, and they said that was actually more present around the Earth at different times, and that's how we kind of got these images. I actually did talk to a physicist friend about it. We didn't fully dig into that as much as I wanted to, but like this relates back to this broader idea of we're calling it pseudo history, right? But like it is like it's not recognized by mainstream academic historians of naturalistic explanations for historical events, right? Which is an interesting way to look at stuff. The thing is, it's hard to really make a pinpoint on it because the religious stories are going to be the religious stories that they are. They're never going to say, "Oh, this is a comet," So it's unless
the mythological eye.
Yeah, and so like I don't doubt that we could look at specific stories in different religious stories and point to actual historical events that happen. I have no doubt in my mind that has got to be the explanations for some of those stories out there. It's just mathematically just has to be, right? This is an interesting one. I have never heard this, but there's something about this that rubs me the wrong way, and I think it's because.
Just a stepping. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, so we're looking at a time period of like 3,000. First of all, it's a 29 kilometer, 18 mile long in American terms, diameter comet. I'm not even sure. Could they, based on where it's at in the ocean, I'm wondering. Yeah, well, the crater was. Yeah, so the crater was. Yeah. So I guess the comet would
travel in excess of 100,000 miles an hour. It passed through that water in less than a second. Now, just imagine flash vaporizing all that water and rock. This huge plume covering the region.
Yeah,
it would be absolute. They think it's universal disaster.
This is what's interesting.
The Earth being destroyed.
Yeah, because like this is a real thing. Like this comet is obviously this crater is obviously real. This event happened. The question is, did it influence human events in any way? And I have no idea if we could ever demonstrate that. I'm trying to think, can we even make a connection there?
Yeah.
Besides looking
I'd
at
like to go back even further.
Okay.
Even further with the same exact mechanism. So this is going to 12,000 to 13,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, called the Younger Dryas, when there was a sudden warming of the planet, and then it cooled again. That's the Younger Dryas period, and then it warmed again. And we had, during that time, we had what's called the flood pulse meltwater pulse, and ocean levels rose 200 feet and then 400 feet. And what is hypothesis, again, this is pseudo-history. It's what we're still trying to piece together is another massive comet impact at the Hiawatha crater up in Greenland. It hit the North American ice cap and vaporized all that water. And just another part of history, looking off the coast of Portugal, divers discovered a pyramid that's about 300 feet underwater. And it looks like an Egyptian pyramid. And you can Google underwater.
Okay, so
pyramids.
this one is I'm gonna push. I'm already gonna get. Well, I'm not an expert on I guess meteorology would be the weather. So what's the study of meteors? I can't remember. That's a different. But whatever it would be, right? Like this is outside of my depth and expertise, so I can't hold it to be true or not true. Other than I can't make a real judgment because I lack the expertise to it. Other than this wasn't taught in my history book, so I can't really comment on it with any degree. Other than I don't think it's true right now, unless it was given otherwise. But this one in particular, I know a little bit more about, which is, and this isn't the only site that talks about this. These ideas of these kind of underwater pyramids and stuff, and
they've been found all over China.
Yeah, there's different spots. And I think the reason why we see it all over is because I think there's reason to believe that these are natural formations. Now, I know you might side at that and say, oh, well, you've heard this before. But the problem with examining this stuff is our underwater technology isn't super great, and we can only go under there for certain periods of time, and the data that we get from it isn't as accurate or as great as we want it to be. It's very expensive to do that kind of research and stuff. I have a scuba diver's license. I don't know if y'all knew that. I'm a licensed scuba diver. Now we certified, I guess. Certification is really what it is. But so like it's something that people have proposed and have talked about, but we have no records of what these civilizations really would be other than the mythologies of stories and stuff to look at. We have no records of, we've never found like pottery shards and stuff underneath in these things. We're just seeing these structures that kind of look like they're man-made, but also could just be natural formations. So like, it's a little hazy.
Step pyramids. Some of them are step pyramids. Some of them aren't.
I don't know that they are.
Driving around them.
Well, how do we determine whether they're man-made or whether they're natural formations? What's the difference? How would we know?
Well, probably 90-degree steps, columns that are symmetrical.
There's 90-degree rocks in nature, though. We have limestone formations out here in Texas. If you drive through down to San Antonio, we have limestone deposits all over the place because Texas was underwater several thousand years ago. That's not seeing 90-degree rocks isn't anything new.
Well, we know geologically that the oceans were 400 feet lower 13,000 years ago, and the entire glacial melt, however it happened, rose global sea levels by 400 feet. And we have, and not even underwater, we have reasonably sophisticated cities like Göbekli Tepe that were dated back to 12,000, right during this time. And it turns out it's like those huge stones are viewing pathways in the sky. It was an astronomy city. I think they were charting where this impact came from and mythologizing because it was so freaking important. It changed global climate for years to come. That kind of impact. It was total chaos worldwide. And I think, biblically speaking, this is the tohu va bohu in the beginning of Genesis. The earth was a waste and a desolation, and this is why God is mythologized to say, go forth and replenish the earth, because it was plenty before, and then it got absolutely devastated.
Well, I don't know. The
Genesis
account, I don't know, would match up specifically right after the timeline, at least of the crater, based on what I know about history. But that details aside,
of the Earth.
Well, details aside, there's creation stories and myths and flood stories and stuff all over. I will grant you that, right? We do have these patterns of flood stories. We do have these patterns of, catastrophic events in different ancient cultures. That's undisputable.
Yes.
The question is, not only are the details different in each one of these, but the causes are all over the place. And they have all these different things. So naturally, that's going to be each of their culture's interpretation. If it was like, a worldwide thing, but like, there's just I don't know if the given evidence there is any way to prove that, like, beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't like what is the more likely explanation that individual cultures had stuff happen to them at different times and they wrote stories about it, or there was a one unifying world event that a bunch of civilizations talked about in different ways. Like, I think Occam's razor to me seems like these individual cultures have their own individual stories and, interpretation of the world. I don't know.
Yeah. And anybody on the other side of the world of the comet impact would just experience the ocean rise and darkened skies. They wouldn't see this column of fire in the sky or other things like that. It'd definitely be regionally mitigated. But this is just to get
the same book also talk. When we talk about Genesis, the same book also talks about talking snakes. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's there's a lot of things to it, that have nothing to do with these events.
You go further into that translation. Again, I look at all these things mythologically. Looking at the Bible literally is maybe 5% of my consideration. I look at it through analogy, through metaphor, because that was a major teaching tool, and one of the major teachers of alleged the Bible, Jesus, repeatedly said he teaches metaphor and parable and all this stuff. And then the Greeks, they use their mythological theater and metaphor and parable to teach certain life events and the development of consciousness and things like that. It's a means of conveyance. So I like to go back to even earlier accounts, the Egyptian creation story, the Hindu creation story, and finding much better description and the most ubiquitous and culturally present concept of God throughout antiquity. And it might surprise you, because it's not how we think about God today. I would guarantee most religious believers thinking about God, they say it's this male, it's immaterial, it's this mind that's everywhere, it just thought creation into existence, super smart science guy, but not really science. Anyway, the further you go back, you find the initial state is described as an infinite absolute, that there was undifferentiated substance before the universe existed, and it filled all space forever.
I don't know.
The mythos genre.
That's a lot. That's a lot to give ancient peoples. I don't think they had specific, I don't know if they were being that specific about it. Do you really think they were being that specific?
Well, I can give you examples. Like Nun or Noon of the Egypt was what existed before the beginning, described as a great watery mass, an infinite watery mass, and then a bubble was made within that mass, and that's where Ra arose on the primordial mound inside that bubble, and it's describing the creation of a space separate from that infinite water. I mean, this genre is so broad, it's called the primordial ocean cosmology.
Rama
is described as this infinite that becomes all other things.
I want to reassure you, Isaiah, that I don't think that what you're saying is not it's not completely out of left field to say oh yeah, people have talked about this for sure. It is these stories are really interesting to look at, and I think it's tempting to make these connections, but what really gets me is just that also, one, we're talking about wildly different cultures and wildly different locations that are saying different things, and also at different times, where they aren't all coming exactly around the same time. And so there's just, it's not enough for me. It's not enough for me. There are people that, for example,
I hear you.
You're not saying this, but there are people who are, for example, who will talk about, Muslims talk about this a lot too, but sometimes Christian apologists, they'll talk about the Quran or the Bible, they knew about the cosmology of the universe that we know today. They'll say, oh, look, the Genesis was talking about the Big Bang because, look, here's the formation of this, the formation of that. It's like they had no idea about the Big Bang. They didn't know about dark matter. They didn't know about black holes or anything. Okay. That doesn't make sense. And also that the chronology doesn't even make sense because you got, the light coming after whatever. It doesn't make sense to go like that. But you're not talking about that. I know that's not what you're talking about.
Specifics?
You're talking about general themes that we're seeing that could link to one specific event. And I hear you there, but we don't have much more time to take this call, unfortunately. But
that's just the framework for getting to what I'm talking about, of the knowledge of how the universe worked. But prior to 13,000 years ago, that humanity had as a whole, as a global worldwide culture, was fractured. And we get these remnants and these different versions of a very similar story.
See, that's where it's like, okay,
embedded in that story.
That's an explanation, right? But is there enough evidence to support that explanation for world events? At this point in time, I'm not convinced of that. I've seen Spirit Science. I know what they have to say about it, right? They're talking about the Atlantis civilizations and stuff. And again, you're not saying that, but
I break down directly into geometry and math when I get into the theory of how the infinite makes the finite thing.
Okay, we'll tell you what. We don't have enough time anymore, Isaiah. I have to go to another caller. But if you want to talk about this again,
all right.
Well, next time let's talk about specifically the idea that all civilizations came from one ancient civilization, because that's kind of interesting. And tell you what, I'll look more into this Burkle crater and see what other people have said about this. But I'll tell you this: at the moment, I've heard similar things to this, and I'm not convinced quite yet. I don't think. I think it's a reach. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next time we talk, I'll start showing you the geometry and mathematical predictions that line up with things we found about this universe with science, like the dark energy versus gravity ratio, like the basic anatomy of atoms, like the standard model of particles.
Well, okay, I don't want to talk about numbers. I will tell you that because you can do a lot of things with numbers that don't really mean what people think they mean. But I would be interested in talking about the first thing I said. Anyway, I got to get to other calls here, Isaiah. We got to keep going. But appreciate your call.
I appreciate it.
We'll talk to you next time.
All right.
And have a good one.
Thanks for calling.
But that's a lot. That's a lot of information right there.
Yeah.
What do you think, Joey?
I'm speechless now. That was I don't think I still don't understand what the how that should change the way I approach these conversations or the way I live my life. Is it just like a hobby thing to look into these and find these connections?
I mean, I think it's like there's a lot of weird stuff about history that we don't fully understand.
Yeah,
how we got to how we are, and people see themes and different things and commonalities and try to pull everything together because it's easier to make this kind of, well, we were all part of one big thing. I don't know. Yeah. I obviously Isaiah's looked into this a lot. This is something he's really into, and he's excited to talk about it. But from what I understand about the subject, from the pseudo history that I've looked at and the more popular stuff, there's always some presented thing as fact that isn't really fact, or there's some sort of idea in history that's not really history. That these little things that get added up. Same thing with conspiracy theories that we talk about today. Kind of a misinterpretation of some data points that end up creating a bigger narrative that isn't actually there. And in my judgment, and again, I just had a 10-minute conversation with Isaiah. I don't fully understand his beliefs or know what he means to say about them or what other people have said about them, but I am not convinced of any of it. Only because, again, I've looked at some of this before. If it was under real serious scrutiny, people smarter than me, who are more steady than me, would probably want to know about it and are probably talking about it, unless there's some sort of conspiracy in academia. But, I don't know. That's my take on that. So, angels. Actually, comets. That's now Truth Wanted canon.
I can get on board with that.
God is a snake. Angels are comets. We're building the Truth Wanted universe. This is it. This is the next step. I can't wait to see what happens next. And it's gonna be one big beautiful story.
Wait, floods are still floods, right?
Floods are still floods.
Okay.
But
as long as we can keep those.
There was a worldwide flood that every religion talked about at one point or another. And that's what Noah, he was part of that too.